I hope people don't think that we spent too long on any of those issues this morning, because there were key things. What the brilliant input from the surgery team, and to meet Carly and Debbie there and go through the staff survey was important. I'm glad we gave time to it. Thank you. So, colleagues, we're at item 10, and we're going to begin by asking Karen, our chief nurse. Are we recording again, Katie? Yeah, great stuff. We're going to begin by asking Karen item 10 to advise us of the nursing and the staffing review and for any asks she may have on board. So with you, Karen.
Thank you. So I'll draw your attention to Appendix 1, which is the PowerPoint presentation, which will be the main bit of this section. Appendix 3, which is the biannual midwifery review, and then the main body of the report as well. So special thanks to the Director of Nursing, Jo Hilton, Deputy Chief Nurse, and Mrs. Sarah as well. So this is the 6-monthly review of nursing midwifery staffing. You know, I describe every 6 months the process that we go through, how we look at activity versus acuity, we talk to staff, that all comes together and it gets brought into one place. And that's what we try to do. You'll notice it's a little bit different this time because we've also included what we've turned down. So there are bits that have come through in this staffing establishment that would be nice to have, that would improve flow or patient experience and make things that little bit better. But actually, we are also aware of the financial position that we find ourselves in, and therefore just step back from that. But they are included for completeness with a rationale of why that may be. So I'll take you through, I'll go to slide number 3 in your pack, which is Ward 18. So there was a request from Ward 18, and it feels like we get this request every 6 months, and I'm sure we've funded them 25 times over, but we mustn't have done, for additional staff for the additional beds. So we have turned this down because we just want them to look a little bit more at the activity that's going through them. This is off-ward activity, but also just clarification, because we did get some agreements on the continuation of winter beds money and whether this would fit into that. So we haven't put any extra funding onto Ward 18. That's our ENT ward. Ward 19, again, we've looked at this area, and there was a request. There's a procedure undertaken which is called paracentesis. It used to be undertaken on the day case ward. These have been going to Ward 19. It is not something that was set up to do that. We could do them on there. It would require extra staffing to do that. But we believe that it's a creeping development, and it's something that's nice to have on there. So what we've said is, no, we shouldn't just be changing how we run our business. That will incur a cost. We need to go back and do things how we did them before and go through the business approval process if that's the right thing to do. So we've turned down that request. Skips and Renal Unit asked for some additional ward clerk monies. The rationale for this was that the senior sister, who has retired, I believe, undertook a lot of this herself, and I've said, oh, actually, let's just let things settle down again and see what that requires and what that is. But again, we've not invested in that at that time. Pre-assessment, again, there was some discussion in there around one of the nurses is redeployed to the fit testing service, and there was a requirement for some money for that to come back in. So there is a paper actually going to ETM on Monday around the fit testing service and how we move that forwards. And there was also a request for an uplift of one of the band 5s to a band 6, so that they have the 7-6 model of senior sister, junior sister in there. And we actually said, actually, it's such a small workforce, even though that's our rule of thumb for other areas. This is a handful of people, and we didn't feel we could support that at this time. Although it is something that we might look at again, especially through succession planning as we move forward. F4, again, we've not supported this again, so there was a request for some additional establishments in there, and looking at doing things a little bit differently around supervisory time as well and uplift. And what we've said is, you're not yet fully established, let's let that settle down. When you're in a position to be fully established, we'll see if that's still a requirement and if we need to do something different. But again, that's not been supported either. Spec Med, this is a weird one, and this is more of a check and balance one. So we agreed probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago, for 2 clinical educators into specialist medicine. At the last review, we took one of those posts out because we put them in on the back of COVID, really, one of them. And we said we no longer needed the COVID one. And for some reason, both posts were removed. So this is to rectify and put that post back in, because there is actually somebody in that post, and it was recruited too. The Meadows unit, so this is where we deliver our chemotherapy day case and blood transfusion as well. Again, there's been an ask of a significant increase in staffing. And what we've again said is that this is a step change in activity. This isn't about acuity. If there is a drive in demand, then we need to go through a proper business planning process and support that through that route, because this is the safe staffing review and not sort of an expansion of business. GAT2 is the one area really that we are though recommending, or I'm recommending that we invest in. So GAT2 is our gynecological assessment unit. What's the T stand for? It'll come to me in a minute. So this has been reset up on Ward 25. What we've noticed over the last 6 to 12 months is that to get flow through A&E, so people attending things like early pregnancy, bleeding in early pregnancy, the best thing to do is get them straight to the gynae assessment unit as quickly as we can. If we can't do that, that means that people sat in the A&E waiting room. It's a terrible experience and not the right place. The staffing levels on there, we're only 1 staff tonight because it's a very small bedded unit, but now we're doing more elective gynecology as well. We need 2 staff on there overnight. So this was a choice of either do we stop it running as an assessment unit overnight, or do we invest this additional funding in? So we've chosen to do that, and that was supported by exec colleagues. Also, we have had an SI and an external review of the EPO service, and again that talks about maintaining flow through there in a timely manner as well. Yeah. So it's the right thing to do. The next slide lists a number of business case developments, and these are in either some degree of development, will be developed at some point, and these are coming from the CSUs as well, so it's a bottom-up approach. So they are getting worked through, but we need to prioritise how we look at these, and the main priority on this list is the Ward 9, which is going to be a stroke rehab unit, and we have the funding in place to do that. So hopefully the next 6-monthly review, Ward 9 will be open as a stroke unit, and I will be talking about the staffing levels in there. But that's definitely better for our patients, and will have a massive impact on both patient satisfaction outcomes and our SNAP ratings as well, the stroke indicators. Maternity staffing, the maternity staffing paper is included. There is no big ask apart from that we continue. So you were aware that we have 2 sets of figures for maternity staffing. One is based on birth rate plus, which we ran just 3 years ago now, based on 100% continuity of carer. And then we have a second figure, which is our safe staffing figure level. And we made a commitment as a board to look at a staged approach to increase the continuity of carer. The reason we've swapped to a staged report is, if you went back 3 years ago, the national ambition was to move to continuity of care across the board. Then, since various reviews, Ockenden, there was a letter that came out, board were made aware of it, that said actually we shouldn't be doing that at all costs, but we should be staffing firstly in a safe manner and then building on what we've got, but targeting continuity of care to our most vulnerable groups, our most vulnerable women, which is exactly what we're doing. The other point to note, and the recommendation, is that we are going to run birth rate plus again in time for the next 6-month review. So this is a full exercise. It does come with a cost, which we will find from within the CSU. But what that will do is it's the gold standard recommended methodology. It will allow us to pull our data around our women, the acuity. It will put in the continuity of care calculation in, and it will tell us what our staffing levels should be, and we can then look at our professional judgment against that as well. One of the reasons that that's really important is because when we talk to the CSUs, and Sajid and Ray will attest to this, they are telling us that even though the birth rate has dropped off over the last few years, and it's fluctuated between 5,100 and 5,500 at the peak, they are saying that the acuity of the women coming through is much, much higher. So the amount of time being spent with a woman, the number of scans they have, the number of appointments they have is much, much higher. Birth rate plus will pull that out for us. So to summarise, you've got a number of appendixes there. You've got Appendix 3, which is the full biannual midwifery staffing review as well. That includes the red flags data, any incidents that we need to be aware of. But to summarise, we're asking for a total investment of £132,000, which is broken down roughly by just under £50,000, which is to reinstate the money for the practice educator, the person who's in the post, and to invest in the night staffing for GATU, which will allow that to run as a 24-hour assessment unit. And I will stop there.
That's perfect, thank you very much indeed. And the appendices are helpful as well with the detail. I noticed in the summary paper, Cam, about the maintaining a clinical educator post in the gynae unit. I mean, that seems to me great. Is there a reason why it was particularly highlighted in the executive summary? Was it under pressure?
Yeah, no, so that's the post, the practice educator that I've just talked about. I've probably just used practices instead of clinical, so apologies. So the post was always in there.
Yeah.
There were two posts. We only needed one when we reviewed it. So one came out when we set the budget, but unfortunately two came out. So, but the person was already then in post at that point. So it's a balance. It's an accounting balance as opposed to a request for an additional post.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, but I'm delighted to know the maintaining of that. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So I'm bringing anybody who wants to comment, and Sugar, please. Yeah.
I found it particularly helpful looking at the and having details of the cases that weren't approved.
Mm-hmm.
I think it shows good stewardship and prioritisation of resources, great detail demonstrating well-led and financial viability. And you can see some evidence there in terms of developing our colleagues in terms of business cases, getting the evidence right. Because in some cases, it's not been an outright no, it's been go away and get some more information. Given that some of our colleagues have identified an actual or potential gap in service delivery, and that's their rationale for bringing their sort of case forward, what follow-up is there with colleagues in, say, 3 or 6 months' time to say that actually, no, there isn't a direct impact in terms of patient experience?
So we do a 6-month full review. So this review is undertaken every 6 months. In between that, we have regular exec CSU meetings where we meet with the CSUs to talk through these things. We have our operational governance meetings as well, where things like this will be picked up, complaints monitoring. But I think why it's really important, the reason I put it in this time is because, we're going to be talking later about the financial position and the financial challenges that we find ourselves in. And we need to balance the scorecard as such, don't we? So, we can't just keep asking for more. There are consequences on other areas and other areas of service delivery. And yes, it would be lovely to have those extra niceties in certain places that would make experience far, far better. But actually, that's at the cost of something else down the road. And I think that's what I'm trying to evidence here, an awareness of not just the nursing and midwifery staffing, but the rest of the trust.
Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, please.
Yeah, I was just, and this is more naturally Matthew's terribly sugar, but I was just thought it might be appropriate as well to reflect the fact that in the capital planning process, we are actively involved in a process now of pre-screening and quality assurance and stuff that go into that regimen. And then we had a discussion of capital strategy yesterday about preparing the supplementary list if there is a shift in the capital profile over the course of the year, either because of slippage or additional investment. Some of those projects that weren't deemed as high enough priority at the start of the year, we're now dynamically working them up so that they could potentially come on board later on. So the whole process is entirely dynamic across either revenue or capital streams over the course of the year.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah. So, colleagues, and Karen, is the ask of the board to note the work that's been done, the decisions being taken, and to support those?
And the recommendations that are laid out in there. Chair, may I be cheeky? Sorry. Sarah's joined us from London, so either could we?
Going to go there next.
Brilliant.
Yeah, is that what you suggest? Yeah, no, of course we should. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So no, that's great. So just picking up on this, thank you. So just picking up on this, a colleague content and noting the recommendations in the paper, taking the briefing, seeing the appendices. Yeah, nothing further to be raised. Thank you, Sandra, for raising your points. Patient experience, great. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody. That's noted and approved as ongoing work. Thank you. Julie, great to have you with us. That's absolutely brilliant. We need to be here all the time, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to say what time you call this.
And apologies, I'm not really dressed appropriately, but I mean, I couldn't spare 5 minutes to get changed. I messed up today, so apologies everybody.
No. Colleagues, Julie did actually what's happening is that I'm going to make my way back as soon as the break. I feel I should be in the room. So that's great. Thank you for joining me, Julie.
Yeah, I like not being in the room. The technology works really well, but it doesn't feel like you're in the meeting the same.
Yeah.
That's a personal thing, but the time works really well.
Yeah, no, that's great, yeah. Delighted to meet you, and I do know you've been engaged throughout the meeting, of course, yeah. So, right, colleagues, so, Julie, if you don't mind, we'll just skip a little on the agenda, just to try and pull back a little bit of time. And of course, as we've got Sarah with us, our Director of Midwifery. Thank you very much for joining us, Sarah. I can see you very clearly, and I hope you can hear us clearly enough. Is that right?
Thank you. Thank you, Max. Yes, I can hear you.
Right, so you know, you're coming across will be clear to us here.
Okay.
So we can hear you very clearly. That's great, yeah. So colleagues, if you'd allow me, please, can we just move into our quality and patient safety work, and we will go directly to item 13, and turn to Karen as Chief Nurse to introduce and orientate us as to these two items, the maternity and neonatal services update, and of course the maternity plan. So, Karen, what do we need to be thinking about before we get into any detail?
Thanks. Sarah's going to take us through the highlights of the last few months. This is the maternity delivery plan. Those who've not seen it, it's worth a read. What it does is it brings together all the learning, going right back to the original Kirkuk with Morecambe Bay into one place, and there's a strong theme of digital in there as well, and using information. So, but Sarah's going to talk us through that, so I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. So if you can all see the slide set as well. So yeah, as Karen said, I'm just going to comment on the two papers that Quality Patient Safety Academy have approved as with their delegated authority of board during February and March, and then go into the 3-year delivery plan. So if you'd like me to pause briefly after I've done the two paper updates first, and then I'll move on to the 3-year plan, or I can take questions at the end, whichever anybody prefers. Just stop me as appropriate. So if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so the February and March reports to Quality and Patient Safety Academy, as I said, as a committee of the board with delegated authority, were received and approved for activity relating to February and March 2023. So some of the key highlights that were presented and discussed, just to update board. As always, we talked about the number of harms that occurred in February and March, including our stillbirths, our HIEs, neonatal deaths, and numbers of HSIB cases and SIs. They are also available to closed board members for review and information. There were a number of completed HSIB and internal investigation SI reports that were closed in February and March. And again, those papers and reports and progress and the update of the progress are again available to closed board. Briefly, there were details in February of 5 neonatal deaths, and the reason that I put that in is that 5 in month appeared to be quite an alarming number. However, when you read through the descriptions in the closed board appendix, you will see that they were very different and included a number of babies who were essentially non-viable. So they were extremely early gestations that did have signs of life and live for a few moments or a few hours and then subsequently died. So when we've reviewed them all, there is not the neonatal team are quite confident that there are no causes for concern, and this is just from a reporting perspective looks like an anomaly, but there isn't any clinical concerns that anybody's worried about. The perinatal mortality review tool was presented in I think that was in the March paper, and that's the quarterly report that includes learning on all our deaths of babies, whether that's the stillbirths or neonatal deaths, and that's required to demonstrate compliance with Safety Action 1 of the Maternity Incentive Scheme. If we could move to the next slide, please. So just really briefly, in February, there were 3 completed investigations which you have access to. One of those was an internal serious incident report. 2 were HSIBs, and those appendices are available, as you can see. In March, there was 1 completed HSIB investigation, and again, that's there for your acknowledgement and review. If we could have the next slide, please. So the recommendations for May Board in relation to those 2 papers, if it's possible for Trust Board to approve that they are assured that Quality Patient Safety Academy have reviewed and discussed the contents of the February and March maternity and neonatal services update papers as a committee of the board with delegated authority. Also, to approve that you are assured that Quality and Patient Safety Academy have reviewed the March PMRT report, as I've just mentioned, that includes learning required to demonstrate compliance with Safety Action 1 of the Maternity Incentive Scheme, again with their position of delegated authority. And then just to note, the appendices, as I've mentioned, regarding the stillbirths and the neonatal deaths occurring in January and I've said that January, I think, yeah, January 2023, and the both newly reported and ongoing investigations that are listed there as well. And then finally, just to note the completed HSIB SI reports, including recommendations. If we could just move on to the next slide, please. So do you want me to pause really briefly there? Are there any questions relating to those papers?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I'll just check whether there's anything that anybody wants any further detail on. And of course, colleagues, as you know, our closed Trust Board quite rightly contains further detail in order that individuals can't be identified at a public meeting, but there is more detail there. Karen,
that's the point I was about to make. I was just going to say, and just remember that it's because of identifiable, that's why they get closed.
Yeah, and that additional detail is available to us and has indeed been circulated. So, colleagues, is there any further detail or questions of Sarah or team regarding that? No? We're content? Great, that's good. Okay, thank you. No, please move on to the next bit then, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Max. So I'll move on then to the 3-year delivery plan, as Karen said. The plan was long awaited and has been referred to in some arenas as the single delivery plan, simply because it brings together the recommendations from a number of national plans and reports, including the 2 Ockenden reports and the Shrewsbury and Telford report conducted by Bill Kirkup. It brings together the key objectives that services are asked to deliver against over the next 3 years. The plan is split into a series of actions for both trusts, integrated care boards, and NHS England. There's a number of key actions for each of those groups in order to improve the safety and quality of maternity and neonatal services. And as you're aware, we've been doing lots of that over the last few years, but the aim of this was to make it a bit more comprehensive and to have everything in one place. So the report sets out the 12 priority actions for trusts and systems for the next 3 years across 4 key themes, which include listening to women and families with compassion, supporting the workforce, developing and sustaining a culture of safety, and meeting and improving standards and structures. If I could move on to the next slide, please. Find that myself. Okay, so the first domain, I'm just going to go briefly through them. As I said, each of those headings has about 4, possibly slightly more than that, sub areas underneath it. So listening to women and families with compassion. Midwifery continuity of care remains high on the medium to long term agenda, with a continued focus on providing midwifery continuity of care to our most vulnerable women and pregnant people, which is what we've endeavoured to do at Bradford over the last few years. There are some digital solutions, including personalised care plans, which to date we've not been able to find a solution for. And this currently is preventing us from undertaking the regular audits that have been recommended and having that ability to act on the findings. Again, in regards to digital solutions in this domain, there is an expectation that there'll be digital solutions that are available to women to enable them to access their records and to be able to interact with their digital care plans by 2024, as mentioned above. So clearly we're not at that stage at this moment in time. Another key recommendation for that we need to achieve is that reaccreditation of baby friendly status by 2027. So we have got a little bit of a lead in time with this one. We're currently working towards baby friendly reaccreditation, but it has been acknowledged that it is likely to involve a bit of short-term investment in order to be able to achieve this by 2027, which will be a challenge. It's quite a big piece of work to actually, first of all, get the foundations and everything really robust to be able to achieve the status, and then more importantly be able to sustain it. In addition to that, we need to provide services that meet the needs of our local populations, paying particular attention to health inequalities, including ensuring access to interpreter services. So good progress, as you're aware, at board level have been made in this domain, but it's anticipated that, again, there might be some ongoing improvements regarding access to interpreting services that will carry some financial risk, but are probably crucial to us being able to really make some sustainable changes in this area. Next slide, please. So in the domain for growing, retaining and supporting our workforce, I'm really pleased to say that there's already some great work that's in progress within the midwifery and neonatal nursing teams, including international recruitment. We have a strong focus on pastoral support and development. There is system working with the local maternity and neonatal system that includes focus on improving medical workforce recruitment. But a couple of the key things that I've picked out that may have some challenge for us include the ability to provide some administrative support to free up pressurised clinical time. That does require some exploration and consideration. From possibly not so much of a risk, but something that we do need to look at is the ability to develop a mentorship programme for newly appointed band 7 and 8 midwives. That does require progression. We have that established for our band 5, but actually we could probably do with having something similar for band 6s, but there's definitely a focus on those new leaders that are coming into post, being able to give them that full support and ability to develop and further progress their careers. And then importantly, creating an anti-racist workplace will require support and guidance from the Trust Equity and Diversity Leads. And again, I'm fully aware that we're doing a lot of work in that domain, but it's so in some ways we're a little bit ahead of the curve, but it is a key thing that we need to continue to focus on. Next slide, please. So around developing and sustaining a culture of safety, again, really positive progress has been made in this domain. You're very aware that our governance structures and processes within maternity services are very well established now, very robust, and that we've made a lot of positive change over the last few years. In addition to that, there's some of the stuff that's happening at trust level. So obviously the rollout of PSERF, we already have a really well embedded executive and non-executive safety champion process. I'm here today, so Director of Midwifery Attendance at every board is already very well established, and we have really good relationships and evidence of co-production with our Maternity and Neonatal Voices partnership, which are some of the key things that have come out of the plan. There has been some changes with the MNVP recently, and we're really looking forward to restarting some of the really great pieces of work that we've done over the last few years. Some of their new chairs attended our recent visit from Don Rockenden, and it was a really great opportunity for them to get a little bit more information about us as a service, and start to get to know some of the key individuals that we'll be working closely with. So challenge, or something that we need to think about, is more oversight and information regarding neonatal services are required at board level. I think neonates have been a little bit of a lost leader with all of the maternity agenda, although you don't get one without the other. The whole emphasis of the papers that I present are very heavily weighted towards maternity, but actually there's a recognition that neonatal services do require a similar level of board level scrutiny, and understanding of some of the challenges and the developments, harms, etc. that happen. So we'll be looking at how that's woven into the existing report, not creating anything new, but looking how we strengthen the neonatal element at board level. And again, another one that we don't do at the moment is involving the MNVP in developing the trust complaints process. So again, that's a piece of work that we'll need to undertake. Just move on to the next slide, please. So around more equitable care. As you're aware, we have fully implemented Saving Babies Lives Care Bundle version 2. So these are the positives. Maternity Server has very much improved some elements of our data recording and collection, and in the main works very well for us. However, some of the challenges that we will have in delivering this plan do sit with the implementation of Saving Babies Lives Care Bundle version 3. Now, there's a target date in the plan that we've got to have fully implemented this care bundle by March 2024, which is a bit of a tall order considering that it hasn't actually been released yet. We are still waiting for it, and I'm assuming that the implementation time will be extended once it's actually released. We know that scanning capacity is already a major challenge for us, so we are very apprehensive that anything within that care bundle that requires additional scanning resource is going to be a challenge to undertake. Not so much from a willingness or anything like that, but more from as with lots of other professional groups, we do have a challenge with the number of sonographers that we have available to us at the moment, and that's a national challenge. The implementation of the new national maternity and neonatal early warning scores by 2025 is highlighted in the plan, and we do believe that will be a potential Cerner digital risk. That ability to integrate it and to roll it out by the deadline may have some challenges along the way. And again, as I've said before, that ability for women to access the clinical records and to be able to interact with their digital plans to support informed decision making, this is a bit of a golden thread that runs throughout the plan. But we are way off that at the moment, and we've worked exceptionally hard with our digital colleagues to try and look for a solution, but as yet we're not there. So this will be a key risk for us. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So recommendations to board as a result of some of those things that I've picked out of the plan. I think in the first instance, given that digital is likely to be a key risk for us and pose some challenges, that we do need to have a conversation with the Chief Digital and Information Officer to agree a plan regarding the risks that have been described, and then once that conversation's been held, then update our digital maternity risk entry relevant to the discussions that we've had and any mitigation or any solutions that we will be working on. My next recommendation would be that the monthly maternity and neonatal services update paper that is presented firstly to Quality and Patient Safety Academy and then to board as per today, will be used to update on the progress against the plan and any challenges or risks that require escalation to board level. So rather than produce a separate paper, again, I'll make sure that it's a key theme that runs within the monthly paper, and use that as an existing driver. And then finally, that any actions requiring financial investment will be brought in the first instance to executive team meetings for discussion and decision regarding any next steps, and also through discussions with our exec to CSU meetings. And I think that is the final slide. Thank you.
Perfect. That's a really good briefing. Thank you very much. And your candour regarding areas for improvement or some of the challenges that are in that is perfect. It's what we should be discussing in hearings. So thank you. I'll open up for any questions or thoughts. I immediately look at you, Candice, to see if there's anything you want to add, and then I'll get it.
Yeah, so a couple of things really. So one, Sarah mentioned Donna Ockenden, who's mentioned in this report, and you'll know from the news, did some of the inquiries. So Donna came to visit us about 3-4 weeks ago. Sugra managed to drop in as well at the same time, which was great. And it was a really good visit. And I think she was impressed and went away with a good feeling about our services, in particular things that we were doing around health inequalities. And the reason I know that is because she then took to Twitter and was tweeting about what we're doing, and it's got back to us that Donna has been going places and saying. She also said, you know, when I said, well, is there anything you think we could do better? You know, she mentioned our bereavement suite, which we were aware of as well, and the CQC picked up on that as well. So what's that led to is that we're going to have a fundraising campaign for the bereavement suite to really turn that around and make that something special. You know, not just a lick of pain, but to make that a much better environment for women. So that's a huge positive. But going back to this, to the 3-year plan, I think digital is going to be key to this, but in many, many areas. So we talked briefly about translator services. We've got a brilliant piece of kit that we're trialling in maternity at the moment. It's fantastic. You can get every language known to man on. And in fact, Sugra taught me something she does often. So I think I thought one of the main languages for our community was Urdu, and actually it's not. It's
Hari or Putwari, that's on there.
yeah, and but actually the translators we get are often Urdu translators. But these languages are on there, and it's a big iPad thing with big speakers. It looks like Johnny 5 I'm Alive, and you wheel it around and you press the button of the language that you want, and you get linked by video to somebody nationwide who can then interpret, and there's no delay. It works really, really well. We'd love to have, you know, 20 of those. You know, we'd love to roll them out further across the entire trust, but with that is going to come a cost that we'll need to consider further. But we know that translation and getting information quickly to women is really important. Still, you know, when we look at the way we've reduced stillbirths and the way we've improved the learning and the culture and the improvement culture within maternity, that's led to that step reduction in harms for babies. But how do we then go another step forward? Because we're probably just above national average now. So how do we go down again? Well, it's going to be more scanning, it's going to be more follow-ups, it's going to be more, because what we see when we see the reviews is, you know, well, could we do more scanning? Could we get more access or quicker access to certain areas and services? That's going to come with a price tag as well, and we need to work through that. And I think the biggest risk, and we've seen this throughout, when anything happens on EPR, it doesn't happen quickly. We know we've very long been waiting for respect forms on CERN and OPAL, and it's not Paul, it's a national thing, you know. But if we're going to be reliant on having things working on the EPR to enable us to deliver to this plan, we're going to have to start making the groundwork with CERN and working on that now, or else we're not going to meet those milestones in 2 years, 3 years' time.
Yeah. And then, well said on speaking the language.
Yeah.
Of course that helps. We need to engage properly, don't we, and be understood, yeah, and understand. Yeah, well said. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Sugar. Yeah. Julie, would you like to come in?
Yeah, it was on the, just on Karen's point, if only we had a bottomless pit of money, wouldn't it be wonderful, the services we could deliver, you know, if only. No, my question was really to Paul on the digital stuff. Are they national issues, or is there something different about us in Grant that is more of a challenge to us? You know, the digital risk we talk about and the risk to delivering the plan because of the digital stuff, and I know there's going to be a conversation with you, but just your first thing.
I guess there's a couple of things. One, I think people articulate stuff in plans, and it's a right to be aspirational. And then the next natural question is, what's the gap between that aspiration and delivery? What resources are available to bridge that gap, however you describe those resources. So sometimes it's not just the money, it's the responsiveness of the vendor, it's the capacity in the team to do the change, it's anything else that's competing for that space. And it's probably timely, we're talking in private board later on about this certain contract, it's probably timely for colleagues to be reminded of the fact that we are strategically working to put Airedale on the same domain as Bradford and Calderdale. And the reality of that is that at some point in time, you've got to freeze the activities that you might want to prioritise as Bradford or Calderdale for that third party, it doesn't matter who it is, but for that third party to actually take that on board. But you can't keep changing it. You just can't. Technically, you can't in terms of people's workflows and their behaviours. So I think we've got a challenge strategically that we've all agreed that there's a long-term gain of having the three trusts in the west of West Yorkshire on the same domain in the same instance. But how do we back off in some regards in our requirements around that for the period of time? And it will probably be in another 6 months for about 12 months. We'll just have to be realistic about that. I think the second thing is maternity is a curious market because it does go from, there are definitely organisations currently who are ticking a box with a paper proposal or a paper resource, not a digital one. So when I say 3 years to do that, the journey for some organisations is going to be massive because they're going paper to digital. Our challenge is digital to more mature digital or more bespoke digital. And then a third thing I'd say, like this is I think where Karen and Sarah and I are really at, is we're just going to have to get a mixed model going. It's not ideal, but we're going to be pragmatic, and we're going to be pragmatic because not just again to check a box, but because it'll make a material difference to the quality of the service that we provide. And I'm doing that through the EPR lens. The question of can we go from 1 to 4 to 8 dictation devices that will support the trust in all aspects of ways is a different conversation. And it's possibly related to making sure that we overhaul our infrastructure to make sure it works in 8 different places simultaneously. But again, the board are aware that we've already committed to that programme, and that's something that we're doing. So yeah, I mean, I was challenged quite rightly at execs 5 or 6 weeks ago to bring back something that said, how are we going to continue to move forward in this, Paul? I appreciate that there isn't a perfect example. Where Sarah is challenged, and I have to support her in this, is that the LMN, too many M's in that sentence, LMNS return describes us as an outlier against a context which I don't think is particularly reasonable, because I know other trusts in Wyatt aren't as digitally mature as us. So how are we squaring that circle? So sorry, slightly longer answer, Judy, but there's lots of things going on simultaneously, but we will be pragmatic in this space because we'll have to be.
Thank you.
No, it's good detail. Thank you, Julie. I mean, 2 of the 4 recommendations related to digital work. So thank you for raising that, Julie. Thank you, Paul. Yeah. Karen, I just said one very quickly, which was how much I would love to see us achieve or re-achieve baby-friendly status. And rightly, it's been brought to our attention that might be financially challenging. Is it surmountable, do you think?
I don't know. They're doing the gap analysis at the moment and working towards it. Sarah's probably best placed to comment. It's by 2027, is it, Sarah?
Yeah, it's by 2027. I think what we found, so when we achieve baby friendly before, excuse me, One of the key things was the amount of there's a lot of strategy around the implementation, and then there's that ability to train, educate and deliver. So there'll be a release of time to ensure that all midwives are trained to a certain standard, which is quite significant in addition to what we're already having to undertake as a mandatory mandatory requirement. So the actual time the time and the finances required to backfill people to release them is going to be a bit of a difficult challenge. In addition to that, it's likely one of the key reasons that we were successful last time is that we actually had 2 people leading on this at the same time. So it's about actually increasing that infant feeding team, probably for a short time, but to do some really focused work on that, to be able, because it is one of those things that you have to be on at people constantly so that it becomes ingrained and embedded, and then becomes sort of natural day-to-day behaviours. So we've lost that, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. And Ria, our infant feeding coordinator, is working extremely hard to try and get that back on target. But yeah, there are a few challenges. But in answer to your question, they're not insurmountable, Max. No. They'll just need a lot of focus and effort.
No, it's really helpful detail, and I've enough about me to know that it can be, the challenges can be quite wide. But we live in the only city in Europe, and we are part of a partnership with a spotlight of children and young people. So it's important, yeah. Now, do you have a view on that bit of family status yourself? Do we need to try and find the investment?
Well, I think clearly we do by 2027. We just have to kind of measure and monitor the import of that versus some of the earlier targets that we have to achieve. But the other thing that occurs to me is in a different arena, as a place that we're having conversations about child-friendly cities, and you kind of think there must be a relationship there through some of the priority work that we're doing around the Act 1 programme. I did have another question, Chair, which was related. I mean, I'm pleased to see, I think the relationship between neonatal, whilst technically it's kind of a paediatric-led service, is inextricable, isn't it? And in that regard, we recognise that we kind of amalgamated some of the transformation and improvement aspirations around neonatal through the Outstanding Maternity Services Programme, which is about to come to an end, going to transition out of that focus phase. But conscious that neonatal came to that very late in the day, what's your thoughts about the ability to sustain that kind of focus in neonatal? I know that one of the driving forces for that was recruitment and retention of staff, for example, and we've done incredibly well in that particular area in the neonatal services. But do you think they are in a similar position to kind of maternity services in that they can kind of embrace that ideology, if you like, of outstanding as business as usual, or are we going to have to put some additional support in?
I think without being too close to the detail, Mel, that's a bit difficult to answer whether they'll need any additional support. Again, I think it's something which will happen quite organically. The key priorities are very similar. The work streams are very much the same. We're dealing with the same population. We're dealing with the same, same mother, same baby, same families. So it shouldn't be an impossible ask at all to run the two as dovetailing into one another. I also think it's really important to say that the neonatal service has dramatically turned a huge corner in terms of its recruitment and its retention of staff, and that it's actually got some really engaged, really key people now who have got a real appetite to lead. And that's what we found with the OMS, was actually because we've got people who'd got that appetite and that willingness to actually take that work forward, that's one of the reasons why it was a success. So I'm really optimistic that that the neonatal element will catch up, or that we'll be able to carry them along. because they've got people who genuinely want to make those differences. And I think if we start to change our language a little bit as well, and this is the conversation that is well placed today because I'm on the perinatal cultural leadership course, is around actually, yes, we are in two separate CSUs, and there is a national recommendation or appetite really that neonates and maternity should sit together, but whether we do that or not, one thing for me that has been a bit of not an epiphany, but is really forefront in my mind now is that it's one of my responsibilities to raise the profile of neonatal services, even if it might not sit with me directly. And actually, I'm in this really privileged position with board that I'm probably able to do that. So I think that if we start to unify and work closer together, we do a lot of stuff together. There's really good relationships, but I think if we are more aware of each other's risks and challenges, then actually that will help improve care and improve outcomes for our mums and babies. So that's certainly one of my key priorities for this year, is actually raising that profile. So I think we'll get there. But I think it's got to change at national level, you know, LM&S, the ends getting slotted into everything, but isn't really being given. It's there as a bit of a token gesture at the moment. It needs to actually mean something.
Is that helpful now?
Very,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. Karen, please, yeah.
Just to provide Mel with some further assurance on this point. So even though we're closing down the OMS programme as a formal programme, neonates, which became the child of OMS and part of that family, is continuing, and there is a dedicated PMO support service improvement in neonates, working with the team and working with Jamie. And we know from what they've done around retention and recruitment that they're really doing well and going great strides.
Excellent, thank
So
you.
that's still there.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Yeah. Okay, colleagues, everybody had a chance to raise anything regarding what we need to do here, yeah? Sarah, thank you very much for joining us from a distance. It's very much appreciated. But as always, you're right to call that out. It's important that you are here with us. So thank you for making time today, and enjoy the course.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, everybody's chance to say what they wanted to say. That's great. Okay. Well, shall we speak with Quality Matters then for the moment, and we'll work towards this kind of 1:30 or so break. Should we pick up now? Should we continue with item 14? And Karen, while you're on the floor, if you would stay that way, yeah, with the microphone. You're going to bring to our attention the update on CQC, statement of purpose, urgent and emergency care inspection update, and indeed the maternity report.
And I could probably cover these off quite quickly. So, starting with the CQC statement of purpose, this is a document that we have to be registered with the CQC. We last updated this at board 3 years ago. It's time for it to be updated again. I've made some minor tweaks where we've developed and moved on strategy and minor tweaks to services in there, but there is nothing fundamental that would change or would have any significance or material difference when I submit it to the CQC. So I'm asking for board's approval of the statement of purpose, so it's the document that describes what we do, where our services are, so that I can give that to the CQC so that it gets uploaded on their website. So it's a bit like when we review the Constitution, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Yeah. So
as you might expect, something that says CQC. I was interested in, it's really around the kind of the gap in my knowledge. You included the University of Bradford in QEDI and diagnostics and screening. I just wondered whether we could take the opportunity to include a little bit in the narrative, in the aims and objectives, part 2 of the statement of purpose around that, just to explain that, because that's different, it's unusual, it's innovative, and then whether we could just put an explainer in there, because it's something that I didn't know about, and it's an opportunity, isn't it, to praise people on what we're doing.
I can certainly put a line in the bit that isn't a fundamental change. That was in last time, and that's in recognition that we deliver services on the University of Bradford site because they are clinically set up to do so. And I think in the future that will actually we'll probably do more, because they've now got an MRs, you know, a really brilliant radiology suite. There's a real opportunity to use that so that we can learn, you know, students can learn in partnership, but our clinicians can go there. So that's what that bit is, but yes, we can do that.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff, yeah. Is there anything about the minor revisions that you want to be particularly
No,
about?
they are just literally bringing up to date, things like the new vision strategy stuff that wasn't in place 3 years ago.
Thank you. Thanks. So, good point. Let's start with that now. Colleagues, as a board, are we content to endorse and approve that statement of purpose? Yes, we are, unanimously. Thank you.
It's not the most exciting of documents, Joe, thank you. But very
10
necessary.
pages of it, yeah.
So the next item is, we had on the work plan an update from the CQC visit to A&E services from last year. And timely, last month at our Moving to Outstanding programme, Urgent and Emergency Care came and actually delivered their update of where they were up to. So the slide pack that I've included, I won't go through all of it now, it has within it a really good summary and update of where urgency and emergency care is up to, and that's not just A&E, that's the AMU, sort of the medical admissions pathways as well. And I think they've done a really good job, which is why I've included it in its entirety. But what I would like to bring board's attention to is a couple of the slides on there. So first of all, slide number 4, which is what the CSU believe they've done well, and this is them speaking with their own voices. So they've broken it down into different categories. They've talked about what they've done, where they're improving services. And I think what this presentation does, it shows a maturity that as a CSU, and I have to say, I think the triumvirate in there, so Farah, Sam and Jill Clayton, are really maturing. And we saw this, we had an exec CSU with them yesterday. And how I know they were maturing is that they are challenging differently. They've got the challenge to challenge us as well, but they know the stuff. And that's really good. And they know the direction that they're going in, and they know what they need to improve on. So I think it's really important that we know that. If we then go on to slide number 5, slide number 5 talks about CQC outstanding actions and where they are against them. And of course, we know if the CQC were to come back next week, that's one of the first things they would ask to. And again, we picked up the CSU on this yesterday as well and said, you know, where are you against this still? Are you on track? And they said, you know, it's extremely busy. Saj will report in his performance report that there's a definite step increase in A&E attendances and admissions going through A&E. And we know that people have had long lengths of stay in there. So they are looking towards the outstanding actions, and there is a lot of improvements in there, a lot of green in there. I think where they also need to be commended is the improvements in mandatory training. And even though you know, it's not everybody, they're in the 80s now, and that's a big step improvement for a department that's probably been managing, not quite in crisis, but in very difficult circumstances for a very long time. If we then go on to slide number 7, and this again shows the maturity of the CSU and the well-led element of the CQC bit really. Sort of ongoing work that started or they want to do, and we saw the urgent care centre bit of A&E start to happen over the last few weeks, which is really positive. But again, they've really got a direction of where they want to go, and they should again be commended on that. Slides 8 and 9. Show quality of safety of care data, so things like pressure ulcers, and yeah, you know, if you'd have asked me 10 years ago, we're looking at pressure damage in A&E departments, it wouldn't be something I'd have considered because you've been there long enough, but we know that happens before. But remember, this is the AMUs as well. But again, you can see this is the scorecard that they've developed as well, so they've had, again, the maturity to pull these things in. And then finally, slide 10. And as a CSU, we pushed on this yesterday, so I said, what are you doing about this? And the CSU pushed us back. So A&E, this issue is one of the areas where the staff experience scores are much worse than the rest of the organisation. And Sam Can sort of said, oh, it's no wonder, it's miserable, there's no natural light. You get in there, it's a slog, it's really busy. But then, when you then talk more, they are doing lots about it. So they've got regular psychology input down there. They do lots of team building down there. They go something like, was that cold water swimming or ice baths or something, you know? But this is an area that I think we really need as a board and the CSU to help them with, because I think this is something in relation to emergency care and CQC will get picked up on, that our staff aren't having a good time. I think nationally, staff in A&Es don't feel like they're having a good time. During the pandemic, you know, they saw a bit where everything calmed down, the numbers were much less than they'd ever been. There was then that sort of bit where it felt like everybody was part of something very special and working together to one purpose. And now we're back to levels and attendances that far exceed what we've had before. And I think as a board, we need to support them to work through that and see what improvements we can make. And that's going to be changes to footprints and infrastructure and how we move things around. So I'll stop there, but I hope what I've tried to do is bring you up to date from CQC point of view on where urgent and emergency care are with this. There are risks associated with it, but actually I think we're a good urgent and emergency care department who know their stuff. And I think that's what CQC inspectors would see if they came. And indeed, that's what they've reported back when they've inspected in the past.
Thanks very much, Karen. Yeah, I think actually there you anticipated the final question to you, which was, do you feel assured that there is sufficient attention to the CQC outstanding actions? It's clearly raised at the CQC.
Yeah, and the reason I've gone beyond just the outstanding, the actions, is because I think we've moved on from that inspection and there's much more to take into consideration. And the experience of the maternity inspection was that if they do come and inspect, it will be extremely thorough and they will look at all of those things. And I think to have those things in place and be aware of them is positive.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah. So, urgent emergency care inspection update. Are we assured? Are there any further queries or questions? Sorry, please.
I think the CQC previously raised a concern about, and some of it was about a lack of understanding of how we do things. It's a concern about the experience of people with mental health.
Yeah.
To present in A&E. I think the PAC mentioned a mental health cubicle.
Yeah.
Are we where we need to be in terms of delivering on that particular action plan?
So yes, is the answer. So it was a bit of a contentious point. So we're not a section 136 suite place of safety for mental health. So we don't, we don't say that's the mental health cubicle because we didn't want to stigmatise people, and also at any one time we could have 10 people in with mental health related conditions, so who gets the cubicle? We did though not win that discussion, I would suggest. So similar to in the same way that we've got a dementia friendly cubicle, we've now got a mental health friendly cubicle space as well. So I think that would enable us to have achieved what was requested of us.
Yeah, I think some of it links back to the fact that in the statement of purpose, we mentioned that we support people who are detained under the Mental Health Act. So I think that's where we're looking for the linkage.
Yeah, so we do. So we do. So we will section people. We have people detained under Section 5.2. We sometimes have people on a Section 5.2 in A&E. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in a secure room, as you will know. What we wanted to avoid was being seen as a 136 suite, a place of safety, which means that if the police were to pick somebody up in the street with severe mental health problems, they could put them in the back of the police car and drop them at A&E. And that's not what we want. There are other 136 suites in the city that will be used.
It's a great point. So it's good to know there's a facility given we previously reported the rising mental health conditions that we're seeing in
Yeah,
patients.
so it's not a facility, it's just one of the, it's a cubicle that's, you know, been double, triple checked for anti-ligature type stuff, and it's not a locked room or anything like that, it is still a cubicle, yeah.
Thank you, that's good. Kind of pleased, yeah.
I'm just going to lighten it a little bit, just in terms of patient and people experience. So it is a grim place. We did a tour recently, and it was heaving. It was just an awful experience. And I just wonder whether happy people make happy staff as well. So there were no TVs, there was no notification going on. All the electrics seemed to be out, and it was just simple things where there was no notification of anything. And I just wonder if there's a bit of a distraction kind of thing that we could do, where we could occupy patient minds with things to do and see or read or watch or something. And that improvement to that patient experience might then improve it for the trust people as well. So there's a sort of yin and yang to make people feel better, is to make the patient experience better as well. So it is dark and dingy and over full and all the rest of it, but actually is there something we can do to take people's minds off that would then allow that space for staff to focus on the job that they're there to do and not have to pick up those sort of queries.
Yeah, I can speak that up, Karen. Residency issue discussions. Yeah, Sash, yeah.
Just on that and carrying on that point, one of the initiatives that the A&E wanted to introduce was the urgent care centre alongside. Because what we recognise is that the number of patients attending now significantly higher than perhaps when the department was first designed and developed. And as you quite rightly point out, it can be really overcrowded, it can be really busy. So the creation of the urgent care centre alongside and the transfer of the GP stream, the minor injury, the minor illness work, what that allows us to do is decongest that area somewhat and move into a separate area. And I think that urgent care centre area has had a bit of a revamp. It's not full remodelling. We have put in for a national bid, got money, £4.9 million worth of requests that came through that would help us to redevelop that area significantly. What we're hoping that does is transfers a significant proportion of those patients with lower acuity out of that area, and so hopefully calms the situation down. But just this week alone, we've never had a day below 400 attendances, so it's just the volume of patients we've got coming through. And then at yesterday's CSU meeting, we were having a discussion. Chris Davies was there for Mark around just getting parts of it, lick paint, and getting in there and being able to sort the flooring out and things like that. So I know that's on our colleagues from the Estates Department, their radar as well, just to improve the environment somewhat.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you, Sash. Yeah, I know some of the artwork at St. Luke's is very popular. If patients have been telling me. Yeah. Mark, please, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's part related really to what Saj has just described, and I think just to assure really, you know, the environment continually and every time we do something in that area, the reality here is, you know, we're restrained, it's locked in, it's at the lower level if you want, you know, in terms of daylight, etc. But everything we've done more recently has always included levels of artwork, daytime lighting, so it looks more naturally daylit if you want, and we've put quite a bit of natural ventilation in as well. So every opportunity and every time we do something in there, those extra over bits to make sure it's fresh air ventilation. It's not just recirculative air conditioning, for example, it's fresh air coming in, it's whatever we can do with daylighting. A lot of artwork, as you've just alluded to, Chair, and a range of other things are continually done just to try and improve. So just to assure that, you know, we're throwing everything at that every time we do something. And Saj has alluded to a bid that we've just put in, which is about £4.5 million scheme. And again, all those elements are put into that kind of concept design. So, you know, just be assured that every time we do something, we're doing everything we can in a difficult area.
4 hours is a long time to wait, for example, without, you know, your phone dies. What is there to do when you have lost your battery life and you're there for a while? So it's that simple things, and I don't know.
Softer measures.
Softer
Yeah.
measures,
Yeah.
absolutely. But your TV's on the wall with the news or something that means people are focused on that and not the person sat next to them or.
Having charges.
I was just gonna say.
Charges, absolutely.
Giving charges to everybody
Yeah.
when they need them.
Yeah, just plugging points,
Yes.
simple things.
Yeah, no, thank you, Caroline, Serge, thank you. It's clear that we're cited on that. Of course, we could, you know, could have an afternoon, couldn't know what could be done. So we're cited on it and the promises that it's being considered. That's great. Environmental issues. Thank you. Thanks, Caroline. And to finish off, Karen, on this item with the CQC maternity.
Yeah, so the factual accuracy on the draft report was returned to the CQC within the 10-day deadline, which was 2 weeks ago yesterday. They then have 10 working days to turn it round back to us, but we know that they're behind. So the 10 working days was up yesterday, and it might be next week, it might be in 6 weeks' time. So we're expecting the final report at some point. But thank you to the team that did a very comprehensive check of factual accuracy, and there were a number of factual inaccuracies within it that we could evidence as well. And it was actually a 78-page submission that went back to the CQC.
Good, okay, and rightly so. When will directors maybe be briefed on the results of that?
I don't know, we're waiting for, we're in the hands of the CQC. So to their standards, it's 10 days from receipt, which should have been yesterday, but they are behind. We know it took about 3 months to get the initial report out to us, Chair.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's helpful. I was wondering whether you're thinking of simply placing it into a board meeting, or might there be some sort of email?
As soon as it lands, I'll send a briefing note, and it will also be on the next available board meeting. I will be surprised if it's not available for the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Saying that, it might not be.
I'm not push for that, but if you're offering to do a briefing note to directors of the result of that would be great.
Yeah, as soon as it comes in, we would, of course, we do that normally. We would share what the results of that were, and any highlights, and send a copy of it, because it will be published on the, as well on the same day. So it'll be a public document at that point.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm pleased to note at item 14 the significant engagement with CQC. You know, we're good, aren't we? And we want to either stay there or go to outstanding, of course. That's what we're seeking to achieve. So delighted to know the significant effort that's been put into our relationship with CQC. Thank you. Colleagues, were there any final comments on this issue? We're assured by what we hear, and we've approved the state of the purpose, yeah? Great stuff. Thank you, everybody. Shall we just move back then to item 12? We'll stay with the quality of patient safety issues. Now, obviously, I realise we've got apologies from Mohammed today, who were hugely helped, of course, by having John Prashar and Altaf and Sugra as members of the Quality of Patient Safety Academy here. And given Mohammed's apologies, we just have the minutes from the meeting in March. The April ones are still being produced. And of course, we've got the appendices, item 12 of the annual report for QMPS Academy, and the work on the strategic priorities and discussions there. So shall I just open up to Sugra or Altaf, or indeed John, if there's anything you wish to mention. We're held by the minutes, of course, and we're plenty on quality and patient safety here. But was there anything from the work of the Academy that you might want to bring directors' attention to? Shall I turn to you first, Sugra, just ask whether there's anything in your mind?
Yeah, so I think, as always, we scrutinise in detail the HC reports, SI reports that come through to us, and as we've already touched on today, I think from the recent reports, there've been a couple of factors and things that have come up around language, and it's always a question we ask. So I was able to go and see the machine that Karen mentioned earlier. So although there's a financial risk associated with that, it makes sense given the number of times language featured in and the HSIP and SI reports, that we pay attention to that. Similarly, in terms of the digital stuff, and that we had a discussion about that already this morning. We've seen a feature in terms of where care is shared across boundaries and other hospitals, and I think all the work that you're doing, talking to local partners and developing the electronic maternity system will certainly help with that. We hear a lot in terms of maternity, and sometimes it feels like I hear it, but I don't think I can hear it often enough. I think it's been helpful today for the board to hear some context around some of the stillbirths, because it's an area that, again, we focus on a lot in our academy meetings. And I think it's important that we recognise some of the cultural factors that we operate in terms of the population we serve, and the number of babies that we see that are on the butterfly pathway, for example. So it's important that that context is presented, and we don't look at the figures in isolation. So those are some of the themes that come up. We do spend a lot of time. I think it's a very busy academy, and there's a lot of detail that we go through. I want to assure the board that there is a lot of scrutiny. And again, Karen, you mentioned in terms of the People Academy, I want to assure the board or ask you whether there's more we can do in terms of the effectiveness of the academy meetings.
That's really helpful, Sandra. Thank you. Thank you for your point about research and the insights that we get. And I'm delighted to know the intention to try and increase neonatal reporting. So, I would encourage the Quality Patient Safety Academy to encourage that and to learn from the additional reporting there. Outside, it's not an obligation, of course, but your John, there's an opportunity if you wanted to add anything.
I see everything twice, sit and observe on the patient safety group. Yes. And I think from a patient safety perspective, a lot of detail and on a wider context is discussed very transparently, and it's all there's no, everybody has their say, and it's very transparent, and I think that's a good place for us to be. Yeah.
Good, glad to know that. Thank you, Arthur. Thanks, yeah. And John, obviously, if you can hear me okay, just an opportunity if you wanted to add anything regarding the work of quality and patient safety.
Just one quick thing, Max, if I may. I think it should go without recording here in Mohammed's absence that the agendas are extremely extensive and extremely detailed in part, and it takes some very skilled chairing to get out the value and assurance we need within the time frame available. I think that ought to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I know that the academy chairs do get together and talk about ways in which they can improve the work. So maybe there's something there for a kind of collective view towards that. John, that's noted. Thanks. Yeah. Ray, please. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I think the other general thing I'd just point out is that a little while ago now, as probably the board might know, the Quality and Patient Safety Academy was kind of split into two halves, really. So an assurance-based one and a learning-based meeting. What we found before, when we were trying to do it all together, the meetings were very long, and it was difficult to give focus to the assurance on the learning elements. So I think splitting and alternating two meetings, I think, has really worked. I think to actually get you binding a certain mindset for each of the two slightly different meetings has worked very well. I think from both a timing perspective and also being able to focus on that particular aspect. So I think that's been successful.
Good to know that. Thank you. And of course, we always said that the three prongs of assurance, learning and improvement have an equal weight, and we, of course, in the business we do, it can be easy to drop into assurance seeking, and so I'm delighted that that appears to be working well. Time being given. Thank you. Learning and improvement. Good stuff. Any further comments on quality and patient safety? No? Okay. And in concluding these items, we have we sent them a research update. Now, is it possible, Ray, that Anne is joining this?
I think she's due to join at 20 past, so
yes,
if she's out.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Woman's waiting outside, is just sitting thinking of that going. And Karen, you've got an item, of course, on our place-based nursing arrangements, haven't you? So
Yeah.
we can deal with that as well, and can't we, for a briefing. I was just going to say that, I was assuming you haven't gone across to the Walton. Hi, welcome. Pleased to have you with us, yeah. Yeah. Come and join us here. It's Sandal, yeah. You okay? Yeah, nice to see you, yeah.
Thank you for this invitation. Talk to you about our research.
No, that's great, yeah, I mean, obviously we're just working on quality and patient safety matters now, and so research sits nicely in that.
Yeah.
I haven't, we wanted to check whether you were here or not, so I'm delighted you're here. Ray, I should start with you, of course, for anything you want to bring to our attention regarding the research update, and then we'll turn to Anne for input.
So I'll give you a little bit of the general update afterwards, but maybe if we let Anne go first, if that's okay with you, Chair, in terms of the, but just by way of introduction, obviously we have a regular update on research at the board, quite rightly, and we do, as you know, have a little focus on occasional board meetings about what particular area of research that's going on. So the academic unit for ageing and stroke research is one of the absolute, star pillars, really, I think, of the IHR. And we were talking earlier about people having longevity in the trust in the organisation, and I think that maybe wins the prize for today.
Be careful what you say there.
In a really positive way.
We've gone together.
So I've been obviously an integral part of the academic unit for stroke research. So great to have you here today. It obviously has a national and international reputation, really, influencing national policy. And so I think it's great to hear from her, and not just about what's happening now, but also a little bit about where it came from. So so I think it will be great to hear from her. So thanks for coming today.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. You've preempted my talk, really, but thank you very much. So I thought it would be, I promise not to go through year by year, but I thought it would be to give you an overview of where we come from, and the huge part, obviously, that Bradford Trust has played in that through many iterations of its name. But so I'm Anne Forster, I'm a professor of aging and stroke research. I'm an NHR senior investigator. There's only 200 NHR senior investigators in the UK at any one time, and we have 3 here in Bradford. And I'm a physiotherapist. So this is what we're doing in slides. Thank you. So, as has been alluded to, John Young was a consultant electrician here who was appointed in 1985. He brought with him a stroke research grant, and he appointed me to the post of research physiotherapist. At the time, there was less than 10 research physiotherapists in the UK, and so a huge credit for Bradford that they pioneered applied health researchers doing research, and it's a bit sad really that that's still being promoted now, but Bradford pioneered that all those years ago. And so this is our funding model that we had that first grant. I got my PhD from that, and that generated new research questions, and we got another grant, and gradually we managed to win 2 grants at once, which needed more staff, etc., and we built up our research team in that way, based it over at St. Luke's. And over that time, we were skating through chunks of my life. We wrote papers at BMJ, The Lancet, Informed Policy, Departmental Policy, Aging Strategies, etc., and National Clinical Guidelines for Stroke. So the big event at hand then was the expansion of the medical school to Bradford, and that brings with it some funding which still exists today. And so this academic related funding, which is awarded to Bradford, funded academic posts, and as I say, that continues now. And that funded John Young, who was appointed as professor, and myself and 2 other people were appointed as permanent posts, as it were, and thus we became an academic unit. So we're slightly different from other units in Bradford, that we are an academic unit, part of the University of Leeds. And over the years, we've developed lots of national and international links, and there's funders, linked with funders and gained funding from a range of people, and particularly have had strong links with the clinical trials research unit at the University of Leeds. but also credit as well to our Consumer Research Advisory Group. The stroke group's been established for many, many years and has supported us, and we've got a big Australia site group and other groups as well now. The Game Changer, which you probably all know anyway, was National Institute for Health Research, which formed in 2006, and this was absolutely fantastic and exciting and really made a massive difference to our unit. This is a slide that may be familiar to many of you. This is an old slide indicating National Institute of Health Research, patients of public at the centre, NHS Trust, such as this one, and universities. And really, it's a good slide. It draws together all the opportunities available in National Institute for Health Research. So the research projects and programmes, we were fortunate, have been fortunate enough to win Agile Programme grants, and they've been fantastic. And for the first time, we had sort of longevity funding. So we had a large amount of funding and longevity. Up to then, it was sort of 1 year funding and that sort of thing. But these grants gave 5 years, and actually I was looking at last time for 1 for 7 years, which was £3 million. So they made a huge difference, and we've won 6 in our unit over the years. The governance systems changed, but also we established the Clinical Research Network. And again, here Bradford Trust was an absolute pioneer. They were one of the first, possibly the only general hospital that actually hosted a Clinical Research Network. So we led the Stroke Research Network in the early days to get resolved and became the Comprehensive Research Network. And again, at the top, there's lots of opportunities for training and development of staff through fellowships and funding for senior investigators. So we've gained an awful lot from all the things that Agile deliver. I hope you can see this, but this is just a bit of an idea of the funding and our research programmes. We've highlighted the programme grants, and most of these projects have been done in collaboration with the trial unit and other national colleagues. But it gives you an idea that the total funding over these years was 17 million. And so we've done a stroke rehabilitation trial, we've done programme grants for longer term outcomes for stroke, and work about delirium. We've got a big frailty programme and work ongoing at the moment. We're looking at exercise for people, elderly people discharged from hospital. And we're looking at working care homes, a range of projects there, and also looking at reducing sedentary behaviour for people and also older people as well. So just to give you a flavour, these aren't all the projects, but I mean, the big hitters that sort of underpin quite a lot of our work. Thank you. So in 2007, we relocated from St. Luke's over to Bradford Institute for Health Research, where obviously we're based now. But our funding model remains the same. We're almost entirely dependent on grant funding, so we have to work very hard to win the money, and then that enables us to employ our staff. And the one on the right gives you an idea of the split of our staffing. I'll just mention passing. The university get a lot from us, but don't put that much in. So there's 3.8 full-time equivalent of staff. So this is full-time equivalent staff. We've got about 40 staff altogether, so part-time, but the majority of staff are employed here in Bradford Trust. And I mentioned Pat before, but in the early days, she was hugely helpful developing all the job descriptions, person specs, and things like that. And developing this new idea of research in a general hospital. So huge thanks to finance and HR and everybody who supported us heroically over the years. Thank you. This is right up to date. So this is a whiz through 30 years. So these are the key metrics at the moment. So this is just the summary of our annual report, which will be coming out shortly. So we're working on grants of a total of 28 million. So there's some that we lead and some that are led by other people that we're engaged with. We've got 29 active projects. We have attracted 7 million of new grants in the last year. So quite a successful year. Obviously, these aren't all just for 1 year. Some of them may be projects that are going forward in the future. 17 publications, got 4 PhD students, And we recruited 700 people to studies. Some that we lead, some that are generic in the hospital, etc. Thank you. So difficult to summarise the key achievements. A few years back, I still sort of think surviving has been great. I mean, this is good. It is an achievement to have such a, I believe, very successful unit in Bradford. So I think it's something that everybody should be proud of. That is an achievement in itself. We've had loads of publications, hundreds of publications in esteemed journals. We've developed the Care 75 cohort, which is a cohort of participants over 75, and they're a rock for doing continual research projects about experience of life in Bradford and experience of elder age. We have a tribute to our stroke group that's pictured there, but we have these thriving PPI groups. And as I say, it's difficult to pick out all the achievements. I guess the big picture is the electronic probing index, which has been game-changing across the UK. So this allows identification of frailty and issues in the vast majority, 90% of GP practices in the UK. It allows identification of people with frailty and implementation of training programs. A newly defined tool is about to come out, which allows identification of people at risk of falls, but also people at risk of hospitalisation, which obviously will be key for colleagues here. Lots of care is the stroke programme. This was more a slow burner. This is an unmet needs tool that we developed many years ago, 2007, but actually it's been taken up worldwide and it's been translated in quite a range of different languages. We've done quite a lot of work about information provision after stroke, and this is informed all international guidelines about stroke. So bringing up to date, we've got all the projects I've alluded to that are ongoing, but we're developing strong relationships with Bradford to see how we can particularly develop our care home work, our community-based work, and we're undertaking place-based work around falls and helping inform the stroke falls pathway and also the stroke network. So that's a very quick summary. I think I only have 10 minutes, and hopefully I've kept the 10 minutes. But I hope I've thanked people along the way, but I mean, it's very much appreciated, particularly in the early years, but it's all new to all of us. But now as well, when it's generated such an awful lot of work for us all, but for the finance team, HR, and to all of you for supporting our unit over decades. Thank you.
Perfect, Tanya. Thank you very much indeed. It was always intended as a rapid brief, and it's extremely useful, of course. And you may know, I think Renee mentioned that research is a standing item on our board agenda. We want to know what's going on and how we can support it. We're very grateful for what's going on, proud actually for what's going on there.
Yeah, so has anybody got any questions or anything?
Well, can I just check with you? I'll open up the questions. One from me was just the 29 active projects.
Yes.
Can colleagues easily go to a list of those somewhere?
Yes, we're finding website, but yes, certainly.
Yeah, they're available there. Yes. If people want to just know what they
that's right. The primary older people, aging, care home work, and stroke.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. I'll open up for any thoughts, questions or comments. So, Sandra, Julie, yeah, please.
Thank you. I found that really interesting and helpful. I feel like I've got many more pieces of the jigsaw in terms of understanding like the background and the scale of the work that you do. Is there anything else you think we could do as board members to amplify and support the work that you're doing?
It'd be nice. To promote this, I mean, I think the work is well promoted, but I think you should shout loudly about it. I think we are a success. You know, I'm nervous to say that, but we are, and we are well known nationally, internationally. So I think it's, it'd be nice to advertise that really, to say the achievements that EMI was developed here in Bradford and those sort of things. Stand up to the university.
Shout it out.
All equals.
Keep asking.
But Bradford, I sometimes feel for Bradford, we're not quite Bradford enough, with the university, we're not quite neat enough, so.
Thank you, Sylvia. And Julie, please.
Great work, Anne, and lovely kind of seeing the money that's being attracted into Bradford. So from the pieces of work we do we do anything on closing the loop about the kind of benefits realisation? So we're doing lots and I've no doubt thousands of people have benefited from what we've done. Can we actually capture any of that?
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's something that well, there's a few things of work that we're really trying to focus on. One is sort of the outreach work to non-Oakleigh and hardly reach groups, so we're going to try to do an awful lot more of that. But also the college is very keen on the sort of implementation and assessment of implementation. So that there is some evidence of that sort of like the Met Needs tool, we've had evidence that that's been used and informed service provision, but we could do more of that. And certainly EFI, I guess that's also the tangible evidence that it is being used, but I agree. And that's really why we're trying to do PPI as well, to really make sure that people know what we're doing and what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, Karen, please. Yeah.
Mine's a similar question, actually. I am a carer for a stroke victim. And my question is really, how do you see all this brilliant research contributing to the happy and healthy at home? So how do you draw the great work you're doing and the contribution it's making to keeping people in home or at home? And everybody knows tons and tons about cancer.
Yeah.
So you know where to go, you know which charities are involved, and other than the Stroke Association, it's very hard to get information out there. So how do you communicate the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, and that's also a very good point. Through the stroke groups, PPI, I work very closely with the Stroke Association, and now I'm linking up with the delivery network people. They're developing the new stroke pathways across the place. So to really very, very keen to inform that really, that would be the important thing, to make sure that some of the information, right around the information for this and the information materials we develop, we're not forever reinventing the wheel. So that is the important thing to do.
Yeah. I think there's a lack of awareness of those pathways out there. So I don't think I'm on a pathway with my mum at all.
Right.
And so she's at home, she lives with us.
Yeah.
But there's a missing link somewhere that I don't, unless I shout, I don't get any help. So, and I don't know where to look. So I've got lots of people, including Sugra, who helps me a lot understand the care network, but I think it's one of the least known about elements, despite the fact it's very common.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with you, and it feels like we go in cycles. So when we had the Stroke Research Network, that was a clinical network as well, and we had quite a high profile, but unfortunately the topic specific networks were dissolved, so we've lost that identity a bit, which is a real shame. But yes, there isn't that many research teams coming through in stroke. We've had a golden age sort of thing, so we really want to promote it a bit more. But I agree. I mean, there is a pathway, but there is a long history and echo of people feeling abandoned after stroke, and that's absolutely something that we're really trying to address. And it's really important that we engage with clinicians to try and address that and to make sure that the services are in place post-discharge from hospital.
Thank you.
Great point, and thank you. Thanks for raising that. Thanks for endorsing the issue there.
Yeah, no, I know after all these years, there's still a problem. It's a shame, but we're really trying our best to address that.
Thank you. And Ray, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Anne. It was great to hear of all the work that's been going on for so many years now. I think what's particularly great is that this is really, it makes a difference to patients. It's not just something which you can read in a journal somewhere and you think, well, what's the relevance of that? This is genuinely making a difference to patients. It's not just in Bradford, but nationally and internationally as well. So that's great to see. A little bit similar to some of the points that have been made, but just to bring it a little bit closer to home, I suppose. So there's a lot of work going on in Bradford at the moment around stroke pathways and changes that are happening there. Ward 9 hope to be open soon as a stroke rehab unit. Obviously we've got clinical input. So Andy Clegg, as you know, a close colleague of yours, works with us clinically as well. How do you think you've got enough contact integration with our clinicians in Bradford itself? And given the focus that we have on elderly, developing how we deliver elderly services and stroke, in particular focus at the moment, how can you use us and we use you a little bit more to benefit all of us and our patients in particular.
Yeah, that's good, and I hold my hand up there. I haven't been over the last few years when it's been a bit busy and we're all been a bit distracted. I haven't engaged as much in the clinical setting here as I would like to do. Yeah, so that would be good. We have got good clinical engagement in Leeds and LGI, and we're just developing a model there of people sort of being allied health professionals coming and doing an internship in our unit to learn a bit about research. To establish something like that in Bradford would be really great as well. Yeah, so, but I agree. I think obviously Andy's very embedded. I know Chris Patterson very well. So we do have some links, but certainly there could be more, and I hold my hand up. I'm partially responsible there. I haven't done as much as I could, since the network is on.
So perhaps have a chat outside to see how we can.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Yeah, no, that'd be good.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, colleagues will know just about Jan's a governor, of course, so, and the governor on our council. So has always demonstrated an engagement with this trust, of course, and that's great. Yeah. Colleagues, have you had the chance to make any comments, thoughts? With that, yeah. So we thank Anne very much for joining us, and great rapid brief, and it was perfect, actually, thank you.
Yeah,
and the quality,
thank you.
Thank you. The quality of that new report has been shared as well as superb, so it's really strong.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
No, well briefed. Thank you, Anne, yeah, really helped, thank you. I was touching on the annual report there, are you content that it's tabled and colleagues have had the chance to see it?
Yes, I've just probably spent 2 minutes if that's okay.
Yes.
So it's there, it's contained in read really, but there's maybe just a couple of things I've just pulled out of a particular note really. So one thing is that the research strategies is now published and it's been launched. It links very closely to the trust strategy, so I think it's bringing research closer to the general trust business, which of course is been an aim of the board over the last couple of years for certain. And I think the linking the two strategies is an important step in that. There are a couple of things in, particularly the area of quality and safety research I just wanted to bring the board's attention to. One of those is the work that's been done around Learn Together. So I spent quite a lot of yesterday at a regional responsible officers network meeting, and that involved the GMC as well. And we spent quite a lot of time talking about the learning from the past report. And one of the things that came out of that, and one of the 4 themes in particular that needs to change is around the patients and family involvement at an early stage around any incidents that arise, and the Learn Together, which involves patients' families right at the start of a serious investigation process, really does that. And I think that's certainly been recognised. It's won a Health and Business Award, Patient Safety Award, and there's a picture in the report of that presentation there. So I think that's really good work. Another aspect I want to bring up in the quality and safety sphere is around the patient wellness assessment. So we know from incidents regularly that when somebody deteriorates, it's not always picked up by the conventional measures of how you're doing. So the news score, for example, which we commonly use. News scores might look reasonable, but afterwards the patient or the family member said, I just knew something wasn't quite right. And it's sometimes very difficult to put your finger on that. The patient wellness assessment actually brings in that view of the patient and their family members into how well is somebody doing. That's been developed and we're using it now as part of an NHSE pilot project, which we got some funding for. Which is called the Worrying Concern Pilot, and that's been rolled out on Ward 21, just to see what we can learn in terms of what other things we can bring in apart from the traditional metrics around potential patient deterioration. And the final thing I wanted to mention, is just some work at the Improvement Academy. And this is the community health checks work that's been happening. So this so we know obviously that a significant proportion of our population is not accessing the healthcare that they need. We know that there's an iceberg under the tip of health challenges out there in the community. So this is trying to actually take those health checks out to the community rather than accepting that some people just don't seek healthcare. So initial event was held. It was held in the community. It was jointly between Prime Care Networks, the Improvement Academy, pharmacy, and basically it was out into community, concentrated at the community centre, just doing basic health checks. So it's around what's blood pressure, BMIs, cholesterol, blood glucose, and the amount of issues we found was quite staggering actually. So of 100 patients on the first time we did this, 60% of them were found to have high blood pressure. So it's not just, oh, that's very interesting, but these patients are now plugged into the healthcare, proper setting so they can get the appropriate treatment and follow. What we're also able to do is, of course, of the connected graph work, the digital work that we've got, and hopefully ultimately the secure data environment, is actually see what that means to those patients. So we can follow them up over a long period of time in a and actually see does that intervention and finding these ill health in the community make actually a difference to the long-term outcome. So it's starting small, but there's a real opportunity, real possibility to make a real difference to our community health. So I think that's something just really worth pointing out. So there's a lot of information there. It's a good read. I'd certainly recommend that everyone have a look at it. But they were just a couple of things I wanted to.
Thanks, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for highlighting the health check issue. I know some of us non-exec directors and governors visited the research unit and remember being quite struck by that as to the well, shall we just say the potential for finding matters that ought to be at least known and managed by people living locally. So very powerful that, yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Colleagues were asked, again, it's a briefing for directors so that we're well cited and can improve our own decision making on the annual research reports and the very helpful briefing that we got from Anne, from Professor Anne Foster there, who ran through 30 years in 10 minutes there, didn't she? Reminded us when it was up at St Luke's, as someone might remember. So, yeah, good stuff. Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we take that. Can I suggest that we finish now by taking the update on place-based nursing arrangements, which is a briefing, and then we can take a leg stretch and come back fresh for Julie to advise us on the work of the finance and performance to start off the second session. So, Karen, may I again turn to you, please, and obviously we have the paper that you wish to bring to our attention, the place-based nursing arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. I think the paper covers all of the detail off, so I will take it as read. So the paper is on the back of a discussion at last board, which was around the retirement of the Bradford ICB Director of Nursing and Quality, and the proposal to look at that portfolio being covered off by myself and the two other provider chief nurses. We got verbal agreement at that point to do that. Obviously there was discussions about my workload, concerns about impartiality and things. So this is a formal briefing that describes and hopefully puts those fears to one side, but also lets you know what safeguards we've put in place. So in a nutshell, the paper describes how the three of us have split the role, how we are reporting on aspects of that role. It also describes some of the stuff that we're looking into and the bits that are the big ticket items, which you will recognise anyway. Things like the Staff Hudson review is still in there and still ongoing. It also touches on a 3-monthly review, which is happening as part of the Bradford ICB. that, is it working? Trust me, we will know if it's not working, not within 3 months or a year, but it is working well at the moment, I would say though. So there's a formal paper going to the place-based leadership executive on that. I also have one-to-ones with my boss, Mel, and I'm sure Mel will tell me if she feels that my duties here are slipping to this board as well, as I would expect to, and I'm sure I would tell Mel if I thought they were to. So there is that loop in to stop if things aren't going well. So it is a 12-month trial. So the next formal update, unless there is something by exception, will come to board in Q4. And that will be whether or not we are continuing with these arrangements or whether we are bringing an end to the trial, and Mel, as place-based lead, will be doing something different.
Thank you very much, Karen. Yeah, so we're asked to note that. We wish Karen well, together with the other chief nurse colleagues, of course, in working for place. Hope it can work. And yeah, I mean, there were perfectly reasonable, gentle inquiries about whether we can manage that, given the role of the chief nurse in such a huge acute trust. So yeah, we wish you well for that. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for placing before long. Colleagues content? Yeah? Okay, great. So let's take a break now, and we'll come back to begin with finance and performance and get through the second part of the meeting.